Joining us to discuss the administration's strategy, or lack thereof, is Democratic Senator of Rhode Island, Jack Reed. Good morning, Senator.
Good morning.
All right, let's start with the president's comments about fighting ISIS in Syria. He said, quote, "I don't want to put the cart before the horse. We don't have a strategy yet." Do you think he should have admitted that?
Well, I think the president was very specific. The context was operations in Syria against ISIS. He has, in fact, demonstrated a strategy of protecting American interests, airstrikes in Iraq directed against ISIS, working with regional powers to try to develop a better government in Baghdad. And we hope with the new prime minister that there's going to be progress there. This is a comprehensive long-term effort, but what the president was signaling is he's still looking at options that might include operations within Syria. And when those operations clarify, if he needs congressional authority, he'll come to us. But his first and primary strategy is one he's pursued vigorously, which is attacking ISIS if they threaten the United States.
Of course, but we also know that there are ISIS strongholds in Syria. ISIS has taken some provinces in Syria, so it appears that ISIS must be addressed in Syria. If you were advising the president, would you recommend airstrikes in Syria?
Well, I would recommend beginning to develop the kind of detailed intelligence he is. We don't want to replicate some of the mistakes we made in 2002 and 2003 when we made assumptions. We had facts that turned out to be erroneous, and then we took military action. We want to be very careful and very deliberate in this. We also want to do it on a regional effort. It just can't be the United States. It has to be the entire region. And I think first what you want to do is identify the command and control elements, then the lines of communication. I would think also, too, some targets that would be available and struck more readily would be within Iraq, so you can put pressure on ISIS in Iraq. And of course, that's with the permission, existing permission of the Iraqi government.
Sure, but it does sound like
so there are many steps that we have to do.
Of course, but it does sound like we know that they are operating in part out of Syria. So when it comes to Syria, should we strike the ISIS positions in Syria?
Well, they're obviously operating in Syria, but the question is, what is the most effective way to begin to degrade them and ultimately to destroy them? And how do we do that on a regional basis? How do we do that on an effective basis? Those are decisions that are going to be based, I hope, on a careful intelligence, not just a sort of reflexive use of military force, as some have argued. And that's what the president is doing right now. Again, also, part of what we'd like to do is not commit American ground forces, but to try to develop on the ground forces that are capable to assist us. Our air power is very decisive.
And when you say on the ground forces, do you mean U.S. on the ground forces?
Well, I think yes. I think we want to be very careful in any type of commitment of U.S. forces on the ground. One of the reasons why we've been recently successful around Erbil is because we were able to provide air power, but the Kurdish forces were very capable, once they had air power, of pushing back ISIS, recapturing the dams, and beginning to move forward. So this effort right now, I think, in particular the president's comments yesterday, a reflection of what we should be doing, which is coming up with a careful approach that is regional in nature, that emphasizes our strengths, air power, striking from over the horizon, and mobilizing forces on the ground to engage and ultimately defeat ISIS.
Senator, you talked about what went on in 2002 and 2003 with the Iraq war. It's interesting, you were one of only 23 senators who opposed the war in Iraq. You did not think at that time that Saddam Hussein was an imminent threat. Do you believe today that ISIS is an imminent threat to the U.S.?
Well, I think you have to begin the analysis with the worst case, frankly, and that's what the president is doing now in his national security team. What are the capabilities and intentions of ISIS? What can they do? And I think you start off with the assumption that to protect the American homeland, let's assume the worst case, and then let's look at and verify what they can do, how we can prevent them from taking these types of actions. I think what we saw in 2002 and 2003 was more of an ideological get some evidence that suggests that they might be a danger to us and then just go forward. That's not the approach, and I think we've learned from that experience. And a lot of what's being done today is a much more careful evaluation of the actual capacity and the actual threat to ISIS. But I would not dismiss ISIS as some type of, just aberration or strictly local phenomenon. I think we have to treat them, first cut, as a very capable and very potentially dangerous force.
So given what you know, do you think that today they are an imminent threat to the homeland?
I think as demonstrated by their actions, they were certainly an imminent threat to our interest in Erbil. We had a legation, our interest in Baghdad with our huge embassy complex, and in that case, the president had no choice but to take military action. I think what we have to develop now is a more sort of detailed analysis of whether they have the capacity to exploit and export their terrorist activities beyond the region. Yeah. And that's being done around the clock today.
Senator, very quickly, we know you'll be meeting with President Obama later today. What will you be discussing?
First, I'll welcome to Rhode Island, and second, I'm sure we'll touch on these issues, not just the issue with ISIS and Syria and other, but also the issue of the Ukraine, which you're talking about too. It's very challenging. This is a time where we have to be very careful, very thoughtful, and leading to decision. I mean, this is not just putting things off, it's making sure we make decisions based on fact and hard policy on the ground, not just our best wishes and thoughts and, and our ideology and slogans.
All right, we'll look forward to hearing what comes of this meeting. Senator Jack Reed, thanks so much for joining us.